Good afternoon. This is Lew Weiss from Manufacturing Talk Radio. We're doing a special today. Tim Grady and I have been talking about the tariff issues that have been created by Washington and all the good or bad, mostly bad things that are going to be happening as a result of that. Well, today we have Chong Wang, who is our international correspondent, senior correspondent for Manufacturing Talk Radio. He's normally in Shanghai. Today he happens to be in Fairfield, New Jersey. How you doing, Chong?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Thanks for being on our show. Today we're going to do a little bit of a different perspective on what's going on in regards to the tariffs that have been imposed by our country on the world. And so we wanted to get Chong to give us a bit of an insight as to the perspective in China, as to the effects of what's going on here, and let's see if we can get a reality check, if you will, as to what's going on in China. So why don't you give us a half hour's worth of discussion on the topic.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's first of all, it's a pleasure being here, and this tariff trade war issue has been for quite a discussion lately, especially with your president, Mr. Trump, announcing last weekend that that he's actually imposing the $50 billion tariffs. And until this Monday, when he announced he's going to impose another 200 billion and possibly another 200 billion, which is the vast majority of trade between the countries, between the two nations.
So how realistic is this?
It's from what I can see from over there, it seems completely unreal, because all of this was never expected to happen. From earlier this year, 2 months ago, when the tariff issue was starting, they started the discussion about the tariff issues and the issues they had in terms of trade between the two countries. They came together, and both countries sent delegations, sent teams of people who are very pragmatic people. They are experts in the field, to sit down together and discuss a resolution instead of hurting each other at the same time. Kind of reach an agreement that would be suitable. And as far as we know, up to the third round of negotiations, that was just 2 weeks ago, they have already reached a framework agreement, and it is very much in the United States' favor.
Well, when you mentioned a moment ago about the fact that hurting each other,
yes,
our president feels as though that he is doing this to hurt China and punish them for all the things they've done, currency manipulation and so on. But the reality is, from our side, from this side of the ocean, we're going to hurt ourselves very, very, very much so.
Yes.
So, and I see the same sort of thing happening on your side, but we don't know about it. So that's why you're here to tell us how are the Chinese going to be dealing with the issue? The raising of the tariffs.
Yes, yes. Well, there is a difference between the target. Well, what happened in the last 24 hours, some of the crazy things that happened, we don't know the results yet. But up to last weekend, when when Trump has announced 50 billion in terms of tariffs, and China immediately announced that it will retaliate. This is you're walking away from the negotiation table, and it will retaliate in kind. So also 50 billion. But the target of the 250 billions are very different. For example, the US tariffs mainly target the vast majority, the largest sector of China-US trade, which is machinery, components, and electronics and components.
Right.
So this makes up roughly about 50% of total trade between US and China. So that is to hurt the Chinese side related businesses as much as possible. But at the same time, it will hurt U.S. businesses who rely on machinery or assemblies or parts that are currently manufactured in China. So it's hurting both sides really to a great deal. Of course, China will be hurt more because it will create a civil issue in the society when many companies, tech companies, will be going out of business, possibly going out of business in the future, but not very quickly, I suspect.
Well, here, Mr. Trump made a statement about a week or so ago that Americans are patriots and we're tough, and we can handle the hurt. I don't know. I don't feel like I want to hurt. I don't want to hurt for anybody. What do we have to do to make this all better for everybody? So on the China side, for example, ZTE became a major issue a week or two ago. You want to give us some insight into that?
Yeah, sure. Now, you were asking me about the difference in the tariffs, and I only went halfway, actually.
Sorry.
The China side tariffs are mainly focused on agricultural products, things like soybeans, oranges, pineapples, cherries, and that is the majority portion, which only represents a smaller portion of trade between U.S. and China. It's about maybe up to 15% total in agricultural products. So they're targeting the smaller portion, and also agricultural products probably has a smaller number of workers in the U.S. will be affected. And also, on the other hand, that these agricultural products could be substituted by other products from other nations. Of course, China has the largest population in the world. They need to be fed. Food has to come from somewhere. So places like Southeast Asia, Australia, and South America.
Brazil, of course, is a very big supplier of goods and services to China.
Yes. So I think although they're saying their response is in kind to the U.S. Tariffs, but actually it's not in kind. I think there's a message there that they are conciliatory and they want to come back to the negotiation table. They don't want to hurt the other side too much. Come back to the negotiation table and try to find a peaceful resolution.
So this is the opinions of the people or the government?
Both, I think. One of the differences between Xi and Trump is that Trump seems to lead the discussion. He's always the first one to announce some new tariff or new stage of the war. But over there, Xi is very quiet. She lets his experts handle the matter. And the head of the delegation, a vice prime minister from China, as Mr. Liu He, he has some educational background. He's been visiting scholar in the U.S. Twice in his life, and he is a trained economist, a very practical man. So he brings to the table more practical ideas and try to get an agreement between the parties.
So where we are right now is that last that I heard, which was this past few days ago, that Mr. Trump stated that if China imposes retaliatory tariffs on us, he's going to raise the tariffs again from 50 billion to 200 billion and another 200 billion. Really?
I don't know. He's your president.
I don't know. You want him?
Whether or not he will actually be doing that or be able to do that, I don't really know. But clearly the Chinese side is not ready to respond. They had no idea this was coming. They didn't think it was possible. So there was no contingency plan. From their viewpoint, there was the first threat of tariffs and then there was negotiations, already 3 rounds, 2 in Beijing, 1 in Washington, and they're coming to an agreement with the US delegation, who are also made up of experts in the field. And suddenly Trump comes out and says, no, we're not going to negotiate anymore, and here it is, we're going to start a war.
Well, it seems to be that this is his style and methodology, yes, which has caused chaos in the world. As an aside, this whole immigration issue from Mexico into the United States, yes, which as of this afternoon, about 2 hours ago, he said, okay, all bets are off, we're not doing that anymore. So we don't know if that's true. We don't know if he's going to stick to it. We don't know if he signs on to it, that he's going to really stick to it. So we're all in the same boat. We're all part of the world, and then there's Donald Trump's world. So this
That's an interesting way to put it, yes.
Well, it seems to be the way it's going, and we're finding this very difficult to deal with. In regards to, in our country, talking to people in manufacturing, they're all very upset about what's going on. Yes. The agricultural industry does not have enough people to do the picking of fruits.
Yes,
so
yes.
we have, the Mexicans and the Hondurans and Guatemalans and so on. We're now beginning to send them all back. So now all the fruit is going to start rotting, yes, and then we can't sell it to
that
you.
is very, very bad. In fact, so in this kind of situation, it is very difficult for the business world, because in order to conduct business, we need stability instead of changing your idea every other day, right? So on China's side, I'm sure that the leadership wants to come to an agreement, wants to come back to the negotiation table and try to work it out with the US government. However, the feeling of the general public is that because the 2 governments have previously announced that they are coming to a deal, and suddenly there's this change, they feel that that it is unfair. They call it blackmail. And the Chinese government is also having internal pressure that they cannot not retaliate. They have to retaliate in order to still have credibility with their population and trading partners.
Well, are the Chinese civilian population, are they very strong with the support of their government and really upset about what the U.S. is doing?
Yes, I think they are. The vast majority, most certainly. Because it's not because that the Chinese government is so great on business. Yeah. It's because that what the U.S. government is currently doing is so harmful to everyone.
Yes, of course.
Including U.S. businesses and people.
And people.
Yes.
And South Americans. And Central Americans. And it seems as though that what Mr. Trump is doing is just trying to satisfy, trying to satisfy his own ego. So do you think that somewhere along the line that the 2 sides, the China negotiations and the U.S. negotiations, are going to come to some kind of a conclusion that will be accepted by our main guy?
Well, I hope so. I hope so. I think everybody in the business community, international community, hopes that there will be some kind of conclusion. And from the China side, what I can see, that Chinese government don't really report this to their own people, but what I can see is that they're very willing to make some sacrifices to favor the U.S. side.
Does that have anything to do with currency manipulation and theft of intellectual property and all the things they've been accused of? And the things that they've been
accused of, yes. Well, these things that are being accused of I find that they're not very accurate. They're not very accurate in terms of what's reality in the market.
I'm shocked and appalled.
Really? Okay. That's sarcasm. Sarcasm. Yes.
there
Okay.
you
I
go.
see. I see. I see. For example, currency manipulation. Yes, China is a foreign currency control country, and they have always controlled the currency from the beginning. So, however, after in recent years, there has been much change. For example, they're now currently, I think the status is that the currency exchange rate is attached to a basket of foreign currencies, including the US dollar, including the Japanese yen, and many of the world popular currencies. Mm-hmm. And it's no longer only controlled by the central government. It used to be central government dictates, but now it's a more market-oriented situation where they're attaching the exchange rate to some foreign currencies. On the other hand, after being approved as one of the just last year, there was an approval to become a reserve currency and status. That also opens up, and the regulations in that approval limits China's ability to manipulate its currency. So I think the situation is really becoming much better than before and easier for all the businesses to be conducted. Mm-hmm. And going forward, of course, it will become even better than that, I believe.
When you say that the currency as a reserve currency, which the U.S. has been a reserve currency for decades and decades, and maybe the only one, I believe.
No, there are several. There's an approval process. I have to look at the actual wording, not familiar with the English wording of it. Uh-huh.
So China is looking to become a reserve currency.
Yes, I think they're already approved last year.
Is that right?
Yes.
So the comments that we're hearing today in our news that says that they are a currency manipulator may not be true?
May not be true. May be pretty old news.
I'm shocked and appalled.
That's right.
A second time.
And even the intellectual property issue, that was a very big issue many years ago.
Yes.
But the situation has improved over the years. For example, piracy of intellectual property. After joining the WTO, China has really cracked down. They had these regulations and laws to begin with, but it wasn't enforced, and they didn't have the tools and resources to actually enforce. If a visitor to China, say 20 years ago, you would see pirated software and knockoff name brands, international name brands being sold at the street corners. Yes. Right? Now they've all but disappeared. Right, because of government crackdown. It's not that they're legal in China, it's illegal, only that it wasn't
never enforced
in the past. However, these years has been improving and improving. Now the enforcement is relatively strong. They are still going to be reviewed by some of the boards. And China is not doing this just to protect, certainly not doing it intended to protect U.S. Intellectual property. They intend to protect all intellectual property, and a lot of that is now owned domestically inside China as well. So the innovative industries, research and development that's happening inside China, they need protection. That's why there's a drive for better enforcement.
I might mention to our audience, in case it's being perceived that Chong Wang is supporting and defending the Chinese position, that Chong is a U.S. citizen. And matter of fact, I went to your swearing in several years ago. And,
that's right.
Right.
Thank you.
And so this is not one-sided. It's the perception of somebody who is well aware of what goes on here in the U.S., but because he is there working there as a consultant and as a correspondent for Manufacturing Talk Radio, that he sees both sides of the ocean.
Yes.
And so that's a point that I wanted to make.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the trade imbalance issue between the two countries. You know,
Okay.
we're being fed a lot of information, and you and I spoke earlier when we were off air. So give me some insight into that.
Okay, sure. Trade imbalance.
Between the U.S. and China.
Okay. So first, I would like to respond to when you said about my credibilities
Yeah.
as a third-party
Yes.
view. Is that I think that it may come off to U.S. listeners and audience that I may be my views, our views, might be defensive of China, but actually it is not. We are pro-business and pro-stability and balance, so that, not pro-China, per se.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
Regarding the trade deficit, there is certainly a very big trade deficit between China and the U.S., and it's been going on for many, many years. However, if we look at the trade balances of the country versus the world, we will see that the U.S. is a very imbalanced country. U.S. exports, the difference between exports and imports of last year exceeded 26% of total U.S. Import and export.
Right.
So, and on the China side, it's just under 20%. So, if we're talking about imbalance, China's is really more balanced in terms of trade with the world than the U.S. is. And the reason for that is that China's economy has been in fast-paced growth for a decade, maybe 2 decades. And a lot of that needs to be supported not only with the global market, but with global input as well of goods and services, especially towards U.S. and European countries, more of the technical support. For example, we were talking about the deal with the ZTE, is that ZTE has broken some U.S. regulations, but they require U.S. high-end processor chips for the bulk of their business. That is why they are very ready to apologize, to pay the fines, to fire their entire board of directors and get a new one, and to pay for the U.S. government to have investigators sitting inside their office.
So in ZTE, what is the penalty that they are going to be paying?
Oh, the first step is 1.4 billion, which is
equivalent to the population
of China. It's $1 per person, so
that
that's
sounds
kind of
cheap.
funny.
Why don't we try and go for a profit on that? Charge them $2 each, so we come away with 2.8 billion. That works,
right? In fines, so that might work. No, it's not going to work. That deal, I think, is off the table now that Trump insisted to go ahead with the war, with the trade war.
So, do you see this? Do you see this as he has been not saying, but others have been saying that this is a bargaining chip that he's using?
I think so. Very much so.
Well, we'll have to wait and see about that. My personal feeling is that I think that there's a bullyism going on here, and
possibly
we'll just have to see how it plays out. Chong,
another interesting bargaining chip is North Korea. It used to be that in the basket deals between China and the U.S., always North Korea is part of it. So always you promise something and then promise to support with the relations with North Korea from the China side, of course.
Yes.
But right after Trump met with Kim, that seems not to matter anymore.
Right.
You know, China is still thinking the U.S. would want a prolonged, a long-term friendly relationship and peace in the area, but maybe not. You know, after the meeting, maybe that doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, we don't know. All we can do is sit here and wring our hands and talk about it and hope for the best. So, Chong, thank you very much. You've come a long way from Shanghai to come here to Fairfield, New Jersey, and I really greatly appreciate it. And your insight is very insightful, so I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to.
And make sure you tune in to Manufacturing Talk Radio. We also have WHAM, Women and Manufacturing, who it's regarding accomplished women, interviewing accomplished women, and that's womenandmfg.com. And Manufacturing Talk Radio is mfgtalkradio.com. And thanks for joining us. And if you have any comments, you can certainly send us an email, come to the website. If you have a story, if you'd like to be a guest, contact us and we will talk to you about that. So again, thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.